Welcome back. Well, the International Monetary Fund is warning that a significant reduction in foreign loans to Nigeria and other African nations is imminent as the global economy continues to experience new shocks and contractions. Well, joining me now for more is Mr. Ari Eisen, resident representative, International Monetary Fund right here in Nigeria. Great to have you on the show. Good morning.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks.
So, sub-Saharan African economies, including Nigeria, strained by high borrowing costs and rising debt vulnerabilities right now. First of all, tell me, how did we get here?
Yes, thank you again for having me in the show. You need to look first at the global economy to understand what happened to the global economy. As a result of COVID-19 and later on the war in Ukraine, what you observe is an increase in global inflation. So inflation in most of the countries in the world has really picked up to unprecedented levels that we haven't seen before in the last 30 to 40 years. So central banks around the world started to tighten monetary policy, meaning raising interest rates to fight inflation. That, of course, has hit the financing costs for the countries who needed financing. And of course, Nigeria, other sub-Saharan African countries, and other countries in the world, particularly those with low or very low ratings in their debts, suffered disproportionately. They had needs, particularly because of the shocks I described earlier, and the cost to finance those needs really increased. So that is the nature of the squeeze in financing that we observed to the global economy, particularly to those countries.
You know, Nigeria and most of these countries have racked up, so much debt over the years. Looking at, development right now in Nigeria from infrastructure and all of that, have the monies been spent judiciously?
That's a very important question because at some level, if there are shocks to the economy, you need to keep continuing with recurrent costs, such as salary payments, servicing of debt. So there are some costs that always need to be expenses that always need to be financed one way or another. For additional debts, you really need to ask the question on the use of the proceeds and how well and effective they were in generating tax revenues and growth, because ultimately those debts will have to be repaid. So it's a critical question to all our economies, the absorption of those loan proceeds in terms of the uses of those proceeds to make the economy grow and generate revenues to be repaying those debts. And that the record may not be as strong as one would expect. And we see that because revenues have not grown at the same speed as the borrowing that has been done. So it's very critical to make sure that the projects or whatever expenditures are being considered, the rate of return of those projects is higher than the rate of interest paid to borrow those funds. Otherwise, there is no need to borrow because it will make the economy worse off. I think that going forward, paying a close attention to project management, absorption capacity of the economy, and relying on your own resources, particularly on domestic tax revenues rather than borrowing, would be essential.
And looking at, countries like Nigeria now and some sub-Saharan African countries, what should they be doing now? How do you position, at this time, with the risk of external loan taps, being shut off? What's the way out of this at this time? Because there's still, budgets still need to be funded going forward.
True, it's a difficult situation, but like in a household, when financing dries out, what do households, families do? They try to contain spending, make sure that the spending is only on priority levels. Now, of course, in Nigeria, spending is already very low. So in reflection of that, it's really, really important, an existential issue, in fact, to mobilize more domestic revenues, improve tax administration and tax policy, plug in any leakages to the tax system, make sure to broaden the tax base so that collections can increase and therefore reduce financing needs. One essential element of this is, for example, fuel subsidies. Fuel subsidies need to be removed to reduce the financing needs and therefore the deficit, the fiscal deficit. So if you do that, there is a chance, and pretty convincing chance, that the situation will improve simply because your financing needs will decline, and therefore you don't need to rely on so much debt as you have been relying.
All right, Mr. Eisen, what are you seeing for growth, your growth projection for Nigeria in 2023?
So this year we are expecting a little improvement vis-a-vis last year. We are projecting 3.2% growth for 2023. And this is on the back of an improvement in oil production. Last year was a very negative year in terms of oil production, because of oil theft, because of other leakages, because of underinvestment. But we have seen the start of this year improving significantly in terms of the oil production. And hopefully that will continue. The last month was not as good as the previous one. So it's a continuous challenge to ensure, a task to ensure that oil production continues to grow. Other than that, the service sector, ICT, agriculture, retail trade will continue to be supportive of economic growth in 2023. And hopefully growth will be even higher than 3.2%. That's what we are all expecting for Nigeria. Importantly, growth should be dividends to all the population, as inclusive as possible through job creation.
All right, I guess we'll keep watching out for that. 2023 already kicking off really hard right now in the global economies. But thank you so much, Mr. Ari Eisen, resident representative, IMF right here in Nigeria. Great to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. A pleasure.